Good afternoon, everyone, and it's another edition of Red and Bold with my very special guest and friend, Mayor Craig Greenberg. Craig, welcome.
It is great to be with you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a deja vu because I know prior to the inauguration, you hosted an event for me in the Speed Museum, and you were the one
That's right.
asking me the questions. And now I'm turning the tables on it. Yes, yes. But no, it's great to have you here, and you're such a vibrant, energetic, incredible mayor. You're everywhere. And a lot of people know a lot about you, but I thought we could maybe start a little earlier, maybe in your journey, because I know you were born in Comac, New York.
Comac, New
York.
Yes.
It's I think an Indian term, I believe, right? From I guess I looked it up, and I guess it's
you
from
would
an
know
Indian
more
origin.
about me than the origins of the name.
Yeah, and then you moved. You're like me. You were not born in Louisville, but you moved a lot earlier. In I think 1980, you
That's
came
right.
to Louisville. So just tell us about your early memories, your journey, your move. I mean, what was it like, kind of coming to Louisville and growing up in Louisville?
Most of my life I remember in Louisville. Second grade was my first grade here. My father got a job at Jewish Hospital where he spent his entire career. And so in the summer of 1980, he and my mom loaded my sister and I into the Oldsmobile, and we drove from New York down to Louisville. And at the time, his friends all thought he was crazy. They didn't know anything about Louisville or Kentucky. But that's where we settled and started our new life. And my parents were thrilled with their decision. My sister and I had a great childhood growing up here, going to Jefferson County Public Schools. And it's really then that I started to fall in love with my hometown of Louisville.
Well, when I came here, when we moved, I'm here now 10 years when I moved here. So we were closing on our house, and everybody was saying, what high school did you graduate?
Exactly. Yes.
Right? And so Kim and I looked at each other and said, what high school? So Ballard High School.
Ballard High School.
Tell us a little bit about your time in Ballard High School.
I loved my time at Ballard. I was very involved in basically everything except for athletics. While I love to run now, I was the least athletic person you have ever met growing up. I didn't do anything athletically, but I was very involved at the school. I know this might not surprise some folks. I was president of student government. I was editor of the student newspaper. So I was very involved in student life at Ballard and learned so much. And it really was a great springboard for me to go to the University of Michigan and then to Harvard Law School, where I continued my studies. But I really loved the community and the educational environment at Ballard. That was a great springboard for life.
Now, not only were you president at Ballard, you were also a president, were you was it in Harvard?
At Michigan. At Michigan, I was president of the student government. That was a really unique experience, particularly there in the late 90s. It was an interesting political time, just as it always is, particularly at the campus in Ann Arbor. And while I had a wonderful experience at Ann Arbor, I loved it. I made great friends, learned a lot. The great sports years with the Fab Five being my freshman year, and doing great with Desmond Howard winning the Heisman Trophy, and football, and a great hockey team, and so much more. I want to be very clear to everyone listening today that I am a Cards fan. And so this weekend, when the women basketball team plays Michigan, there is no doubt that I'll be rooting for the Cards.
Yeah, we're excited about that. And of course, it was great to be there yesterday. I know you were there yesterday supporting on our women's basketball teams.
Great program.
Yeah, great things ahead, hopefully, and we're really excited for them. So I guess, clearly you had leadership and community service in your DNA, right? Serving. So I guess what was it about that experience that brought you into, serving students when you were at Ballard High School, when you went to Michigan, and obviously you bring it today to your service to the city. So I guess tell us a little bit.
I'm not sure is the answer, but I really do think it goes back to both of my parents. Both of my parents started their careers as public school teachers in New York City. And they brought that passion for education to being parents and to their lives in Louisville. While my dad was with Jewish Hospital as an administrator for his whole career, he spent his civic volunteer time in the world of education and was involved in the Council on Post-Secondary Education. He was a chair of the Council on Post-Secondary Education, Governor Patton credits him with helping to create the idea for Bucks for Brains, which was a transformative program several decades ago for U of L and other universities in Kentucky. And my mom's whole life professionally, she stayed in education. She got a PhD here in Louisville.
Wow.
After my sister and I think when we were in middle school or high school. And then she made her entire career after that in education, first teaching English at JCTC, and then coming here to U of L, where she was in the medical school. And why a person with a doctorate in English was at the medical school, I'm still not sure I totally understand. But she was very involved in a lot of what the medical school was doing with accreditation and other special programs. And so really being involved in education and promoting and supporting public education at all levels, K through 12 and post-secondary, was almost in my DNA. It was certainly something that we talked about growing up as a kid. And so that's when I think when I had the opportunity to start getting involved here in Louisville and I had the opportunity to be appointed to the Board of Trustees here in Louisville,
right.
I jumped on that. That was a wonderful opportunity and really a transformative experience for me.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I was going to get to the fact that you were on our Board of Trustees for 3 years, I think. Was it 2014, 2017?
That's right.
Frame?
That's right.
So, tell me about your journey from law school, right? You graduated from one of the famous, best law schools in the world. And you came back to Louisville, went into a firm here in Louisville, and then you kind of blossomed into the business world. So tell us a little bit about your journey there.
Well, I went to law school because I was really passionate about public service. And I'm actually living my dream, Gerry, that I've always wanted to be, ever since middle school, I've wanted to be mayor of Louisville. This was my dream job. And so I, in large part, went to law school thinking that was a great path to get into public service. And then, of course, life throws you curveballs, and they were great curveballs. And so my legal career quickly transformed into an entrepreneurial career, I had clients that had the idea to create 21C museum hotels.
Yes.
And so even though I knew nothing about the hospitality or hotel industry, I'd never done a real estate deal in my life as a lawyer, they asked me to help put together what became 21C here in Louisville. And that really started this entrepreneurial journey where Steve and Laura Lee and myself started the company and built it into a company that had at one point 1,000 employees with 9 properties across the Midwest and Southeast. And we really helped revitalize urban areas through our hotel, museum, and restaurant projects. And those were wonderful experiences where I learned a lot, had a wonderful team of people that we were all working together on those projects. And I wouldn't trade, even though that got me off my path to public service, wouldn't trade those years for anything. At the same time, Rachel and I were starting our family and raising the boys. And so really public service went out of my brain for a good decade or more. And it was only once we decided to sell 21C and I started thinking about what my next chapter might be that I got back to my original childhood dream of working to become mayor of Louisville.
That makes sense, because normally I would see somebody maybe having an earlier trajectory, like serving maybe on the city council and then kind of projecting. So that explains now kind of your journey.
I did. In 2001, I spent about 2 or 3 months where I was actually filed to run for U.S. Congress. Oh. But I quickly realized it was not the right time for me, my family. Okay. And so I gave back all the money that I had raised. And at that point in time, I put public service mostly out of my brain, at least running for office, until after we sold 21C.
Yeah. Wow. So then you decided to follow your dream and run for mayor. So tell me a little bit about, what does that look like from a person who's, done the business world and now suddenly you come home and you tell Rachel, hey, Rachel, I got a great idea. We're going to go for this job here that doesn't, pay a whole lot. But
that's right. It was really, first of all, Rachel and the boys were incredibly supportive. I would not have done it without their 110% support. And it was not a surprise to them because it sort of evolved gradually, but she knew it was something that I was always interested in doing. We had talked about it from the very early days of our relationship when after law school, I wanted to move back home. She knew why at that point I wanted to move back home. And it was COVID at the time. We were in quarantine. That is when I really started seriously thinking about it. And so it was this unique period where we had sold the company. I'd stayed for a couple of years to help get them integrated and launched with the new owners. And it was time for me to move on to my next chapter. And not everyone didn't know I was going to run for mayor yet, but I knew I was gearing towards that. So I had a lot of time to prepare.
Yeah.
And I just approached it like any other project that I've been involved with before. Get very organized, have a really strong plan that you think is going to work, and go out there and try to shock the world. Go out there and try to do something big and bold that people might not see coming or they might not think is possible. But if you outwork everyone, if you have good colleagues and teammates and supporters helping you on towards a goal, whether it's running for mayor or running a university or building a building, I believe people can do anything they set their mind to. It might take a little longer. It might not go according to the exact plan you originally set out, but that's what we did. And I thought there was a real path to winning the race. It was a very competitive race with 8 people running in the Democratic primary with me, 4 people in the Republican primary. And our plan worked. And I think people were excited about the new direction that I was talking about moving our city in. And so I'm very fortunate. It's the honor of a lifetime to now be mayor.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you certainly have brought a ton of energy, as I mentioned earlier, into that role. And it's been a pleasure for me working with you this past year when I, assumed the role of president, and the work you've done around LEADA, and clearly, now One Louisville with the merging of GLI, and, the work that Trevor Paul has done around, raising the economic profile of Louisville and the region among, prospective employers that are coming in and adding that sort of energy. So it's just been really amazing to see the transformation that you've done. Now, I think another thing that you've also brought is your ability to work with individuals that maybe in the past people didn't reach across the aisle. And I know that you have developed a really great relationship in Frankfurt with, folks on the Republican side, the Democrat side. And I think, during your period of time, we've seen an incredible amount of investment from the state Commonwealth in Louisville. So could you talk to us a little bit how your philosophy is? Because we hear this problem all the time about people can't work together. We have this division and this toxic climate right now in politics. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think that is the case in D.C., but it's not the case, at least my experience, in Frankfurt. And it never was. It goes back really to some projects I had worked on when I was in the real estate world, working to build a project that actually never happened called Museum Plaza that was planned for the corner of 7th and Main Street at the river, which was going to be a transformative project to our city. And we were working with the state legislature at the time on some incentives to help make that project happen. And through that, I met a lot of people, many of whom are still in the legislature today. And I realized that even if there were differences on certain issues, there was far more that we had in common than we had apart. We were able to work together on this initiative. And so I brought that same approach to when I became mayor. It's sort of the same as when I was on the U of L Board of Trustees. At the time, you had people that were appointed by different governors of different political parties, but everybody, their goal was to help build the best University of Louisville. And we didn't always agree on everything that we were doing, but everyone had the same goal in mind. And that's the way I approach being mayor, is that whether you're from a rural part of the state, an urban part of the state, whether you're Democrat, Independent, Republican, we all want our kids to have a good education. We all want good roads that are paved. We all want good paying career path jobs close to home. And the list goes on and on and on. So let's work together where we can. And it's okay to disagree. But when we disagree, you shouldn't just be throwing bombs. That doesn't help make progress. That just might help you get clicks on social media. Yeah. But I'm not in this for clicks on social media. I'm in this job to get stuff done. And so I think that's worked in Frankfurt. I built great relationships with people. We have very open conversations about issues that we disagree on, but we've been able to work very effectively, just like you have in the state legislature, to get things done and advance the cause that you represent, which also supports the cause that they're looking to do, which is to improve our Commonwealth of Kentucky. And if you have a strong university, if you have a strong largest city, that's great for the whole state.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like you're echoing the words of Congressman McGarvey and President Stivers, who were here, my first broadcast. And, it is amazing. And I think President Stivers mentioned it, that the media like to play up the differences.
They do.
But they never talk about the 95% of things that people agree on, right? And that's what gets things done. We're all worried about a paycheck. We're all worried about a good education. We're all worried about safety. And that's what unites us all. Maybe the way to get there is a little bit different. And I have to say, my board of trustees, they are also political appointees, but I have to say I have never seen any evidence of any political party in the conversations that we have when we work together, because it's all around the issues, right? The issues of education and how do we move the university forward. That's not the case in other parts of the country. I've interviewed some people for jobs, and to hear the sort of discord that sometimes happens in that environment, I feel really, kind of blessed we have this climate here.
Yeah, my view has always been that so many of the issues dividing us on a partisan divide these days in Washington, they don't apply to so much of what we're focused on here at home, whether it's education or whether it's local issues that the city government deals with. And I feel like even the political parties can't agree amongst themselves on so many things these days. So I think we're seeing a shattering of political norms.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that we can be role models for what's going on here in Louisville and across Kentucky.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get to that a little bit later for your advice around what you give to our students. No, I think it's great, because this is kind of the purpose of this, is to bring folks like you to give your perspective and to share them with our audience, which, largely are young people looking potentially to you as a role model going forward. But if I could go back to now your accomplishments and the things you've done as mayor, because I know we talk about the town and gown. So it's the interaction between sort of the city and the university. And you've so much accomplishments that I could go into. And I want to let you talk about them, because I'm sure there are things that you have you dreamt about when you got this job. And if I got this chance, I'm going to do these things. So talk about some of those things that really have excited you, that, when you look back, 20 years from now, you're sitting beside the fireside talking to Rachel about the past.
The good old days.
Yeah. What are the things that really excited you about your work here?
Well, what's interesting about that question is, yes, I like to build things, whether it's improving our parks or our libraries or revitalizing downtown. And we're doing all of those things. That's, I think, in large part what drove me to run for mayor and where I really thought I wanted to spend most of my time. But then, maybe like you, when you became president, you realize that there's a lot of other responsibilities, and at least in my case, that needed a lot of attention, that had been overlooked, that had serious financial challenges, and needed just some good old-fashioned leadership, management, tough but important decisions to be made quickly to improve our city's life and to improve families' lives. I got there and our public transportation system was insolvent. Our Metropolitan Housing Authority, which provides housing and support for about 35,000 residents of Louisville, was dealing with serious financial trouble and almost serious, possibly federal issues. The list goes on and on of things like that needed fixing. And so those aren't things that make the headlines of the newspaper or are exciting for social media, but for the long-term strength of our city needed to be fixed. Now, 3 years in, a lot of that has been improved. We've got great leadership across city government. People are starting to see the projects that we've been building coming to fruition and taking life or starting. And I'm really going to be excited about that, about the legacy that we leave for our park system, for our libraries, for downtown and what that looks like. But the one legacy that I think I'm going to be most excited about is in the area of education. Now, as you well know, the city government is not directly involved with K through 12 education. That's JCPS's purview. You and Simmons College and Bellarmine and all the other higher educations, they have their own governance structures. But I think great cities have great educational systems. And so I wanted to help improve all of education in Louisville. And based on research that I had seen and talking to educators like you and others, it was very clear that far too many kids are, the first time they ever go into a classroom is their first day of kindergarten in JCPS. And for many of those kids, they're already behind, and odds are they'll never catch up. And the research shows that those are kids that will not achieve high educational attainment. They won't earn as much for their families. They won't be as healthy as people that have good educations. They're 70% more likely to be arrested for committing violent crimes at some time in their life. And so my question was, what can the city do to improve early childhood education? And so we put together a task force. We quickly launched a new initiative called Thrive by 5 Louisville. And now with help from folks at U of L that are really experts in this area and others around the community, we are working to make quality childcare and early childhood education a reality for all 3 or 4-year-olds. And my hope is that by the time I'm done being mayor, we have put these programs in place that are truly transformative for the next generations of Louisvillians. And that the folks that go to JCPS that ultimately wind up coming to U of L are more educated than ever before, which is great for them, great for their families, and great for our city.
Absolutely. I think, it kind of reminds me of the data that we had released in January, I think of 25, our national report card about, it looks at 4th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
And essentially we are worse than we ever were. And even prior to COVID, we have not recovered. And I know that we deal with that with our high school graduates coming in now, that, a lot of times they look like on paper, they have the same grade point average. They look like they have the same attainment of knowledge, but they're not there where they were, years back. So, we are all dealing with that right now, the gaps and the achievement gaps. And we're all working, I know, at the university level. And clearly the work you're doing is amazing. And I know it's a shared love, right? Because isn't Rachel a background in teaching?
She is.
Continues to this day?
She had gotten a master's degree. She was working here in Humana when we first moved here. But she quickly realized her love was for teaching. And so she went back, got a master's degree in teaching, taught English as a second language at Wheatley Elementary School. Then she became a substitute teacher for many years and still loves being in the classroom at every opportunity she can.
Yeah, that's awesome. So going back to the town and gown, I think the relationship, and I have to say to the viewers here, when I, was selected as the president, the first call I got was from Mayor Craig Greenberg. I got a text. He said, "Hey, Gerry, can we connect?" And I think it speaks volumes to the connection that, you had with Kim Chatzel, with, prior mayors that had, and O'Neilly, with Greg Fisher, that special relationship between the university and the city. Can you talk to us a little bit about your perspective of it? And I know you and I have worked on a lot of things together. We're on a lot of boards together. And I guess, how do you see it grow as well? Because, I'm anxious to continue to evolve this spirit of collaboration. And LouMed is an example of the work that the city has done with the hospital systems, with U of L. So, talk a little bit.
It's critically important to all of your students, your faculty, your administration, and to the entire city. And when I hear from other mayors that there are strained relationships between their large university and their city and them, I don't get it, because it doesn't serve anyone's benefit. And so we have to find ways to work together. It's so important. And overlapping issues, public safety, infrastructure, parks, quality of life. When we're investing in downtown or Old Louisville or other neighborhoods, when we're bringing world-class events, when we're bringing the UFL, a new professional football team, to town, all of that helps your students. It's more things for U of L students to do. It's more reasons for them to stay in Louisville after they graduate. So the relationship is so intertwined. And I'm just fortunate that we've had great leaders like you that we've been able to work with, and that we can work on some planning together, like some of the initiatives in LouMed and the new park that we've opened at LouMed Commons, or helping to plan for the future with some of your development there. Whether it's figuring out how to better connect U of L's campus in Old Louisville with downtown to improve some security issues and safety issues in Old Louisville around campus. But also, when things don't go as well, you need to have those strong relationships so that you have these strengths and trust in one another, that you can work together really quickly when you need to. And that's also very important.
Absolutely, yeah. I can only say that, involving with businesses and with the city or with our students, as we bring students either in from outside Kentucky, which we've done a lot of with, as you know, with our border benefit program, but creating those work opportunities even while they're in school and being connected. So that was one of the things that I think we take great pride in, is that the fact that we have a triple classification with Carnegie. We're Research R1, we're community engaged, we're really embedded in the community, but we're also an Opportunity and Success Carnegie campus, which means that our students are getting employment and at 1.5 times the salary of their peers from high school. You know, so again, people talk about the value of higher education, and of course, I'm a first-generation student, and I've seen that in my own experience. But you know, partnering with businesses and with the city has been so important as we think about moving the economy forward. Because as you said,
that's going to be even more important. I was just reading this morning about how for college graduates, it's an incredibly scary time right now. The world is changing so fast. AI is changing the nature of many entry-level jobs that college graduates may have as their first job out of college. And so making sure that our city is a place where there are good opportunities for your graduates, regardless of which school they're graduating from, is critically important. And that's why having your involvement in our new organization, One Louisville, leading economic development forward, why helping to support you in Frankfurt so that you all get the support you need from the federal and state governments to continue having strong medical research programs, having a strong engineering school that are churning out the next generations of entrepreneurs. That's critical to our city.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, we talked about LouMed, and for folks listening, you know, this has sort of been a work where, you know, Norton and U of L and Jefferson Schools and Metro have worked to kind of improve the sort of the landscape around the area of the health campus, so we can, you know, kind of embed and immerse the city life into the campus and make it a living, thriving thing. And we're so excited about the HSC building, which actually I'm attending an event tonight.
Oh, good.
With some, you know, donors to kind of talk and friends and alumni to talk about, you know, the direction of that building. We're so excited. And as you mentioned, you know, we work together when it deals with requests like this to the legislative branch, because a lot of people think we kind of submit our little requests independently, but actually we're always working together, you know, when we go to Frankfurt or when we go to DC, you know, because we clearly want to advocate for each other, because all ships rise. When the tide rises, all ship rises. Right?
And I think that actually helps. I know that there are other cities in Kentucky and elsewhere where people feel like they have to compete against every other request. I actually think it strengthens both of our requests when we're supporting one another.
Yeah.
And so collectively we're asking for more, but I think people see that all of our requests are part of a larger strategy that move our city and state forward.
Yeah. What's been the biggest surprise of being a mayor? You know, because people think of, you know, the mayor has got all the positives, like, you know, everybody thinks the president of the university, you know, has got all this power and whatever.
Right, it's just easy stuff
and it's
to go cut ribbons.
Yeah, the armchair quarterback. You kiss babies, you open buildings. So what's been the biggest surprise for you in your role as mayor?
Well, one of the big surprises is, you know, my career as a leader in the business world was by starting a company and then growing it. And so the culture of our company, 21C, was sort of what the founders and the leadership team and I had created. And I thought, okay, I can just become the leader of a new 5,000-6,000 person organization, Louisville Metro government. And I was going to have some great deputy mayors that all shared my values and goals. And overnight, we were going to all start, you know, rowing in the same direction. Everyone was going to be on the same team because there was a new mayor. And what I realized is that's not the case. And changing the culture of an organization is far more challenging than I thought, based on my experiences over the past decade or more prior to becoming mayor. And it's not just as simple as sending around a new set of norms, talking about what your goals are, and then repeating them. It takes building relationships, having people understand why, and also acknowledging that just people might be really good people who are really smart, but when the goals change, it might not be the right team for them to be on anymore. And there might be something that better suits them and the organization. and knowing that you need to make changes. And so that I think the culture of our city is in a far better place now. I'm excited about what we've done, whether it's LMPD or my 5,000 colleagues at large throughout Louisville Metro government. But that did not happen overnight as I was wishing it would. But that's okay. Now I think I'm a better leader as a result of the experiences that I've had. And I've also learned how important it is to listen. I think, like you were saying, people probably think, oh, if you're the mayor, if you're the president of the university, you just make decisions all day and tell people what to do. No, I have to make decisions, and people might look to me for decisions about a whole range of things that others have more experience and knowledge about than me. So one of the things that I really value in others is asking questions. And I try to ask as many questions as possible to learn and learn quickly in the event that I'm then the one who has to make a decision in a certain situation.
Wow. Yeah. The old thing about culture trumps strategy, right? So
every day.
You kind of live that. So that's great. You've been able to kind of share with us a little bit about your leadership style. So very good. So my last question, and this has just been a wonderful conversation now. I know you've got two wonderful boys.
Yes.
And they have been amazingly successful young men. Had the pleasure to meet with them a couple of times now. And I follow one of them on LinkedIn.
He loves his LinkedIn.
He links his LinkedIn page. So what advice, clearly as a father, but what advice would you give our students today who might be listening in about you would give them for their future, about things that you would really have taken home and that you would like to impart with them?
A few things. One is always be listening and learning, that your education does not stop when you get your U of L degree. I'm still learning to this day, and that's part of what makes life so interesting is learning new things every day. And asking questions. I think some people feel like asking questions is a sign of weakness. Everyone is expected to know everything. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think asking questions is a phenomenal sign of curiosity, of intellect, of interest in the subject matter. And so I would encourage people to always keep asking questions. Work hard. I know AI is changing the world, but I'm still a believer that working hard will always yield dividends. People recognize individuals that do work hard and don't work hard in every area of life. And those that do will have more opportunities, are more likely to succeed. And then the last thing is follow your dreams, pursue it. I'm living proof that it might not be on the exact path that you think. You might have to take a break from pursuing your dreams to do something else to make ends meet. But don't give up on your dreams. Try to find a way, because when you're passionate about what you're doing, life is so much better. Being happy is so important. I think people put far too much importance on wealth or other things. And at the end of the day, it's about happiness. Now, those things might add to one's happiness, but having happiness as a goal versus other things, I think, is incredibly rewarding, will lead to a very full life personally and professionally. And you can do it all right here from Louisville these days. That's what's great about one of the things that's great about the way the world is changing. There is no reason why any one of your students cannot achieve their dreams, whatever they are, from right here in Louisville.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. So ask questions, work hard, and follow your passion.
Go for
your dream. Go for it.
Yes.
Well, Mayor Greenberg, I just want to thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over the past year. And thank you for your service to our community. I mean, people, you don't recognize what our elected officials do. And to go and do what you do day in and day out, oftentimes sacrificing your own personal, private time with your family. But thank you for what you do for us day in and day out.
Well, likewise, I know that you have a job that you and your wife, Kim, live as well. Thank you for your leadership. I'm so excited about our continued partnerships and our team's continued partnerships to build this great university and city and move it in an exciting direction. And so thank you very much for having me, and go Cards.
Go Cards, and thank you all to Card Nation.